All right, we are just getting started on week 3 of Vulnerable Visibility 101. Today, our focus is what I'm calling building strength. We're going to be talking mostly about boundaries today. I thought about squishing something else in, but I have so much to say about boundaries, and I think that it's such an important topic and skill set, especially for vulnerable visibility, that I thought we would just focus in on it altogether. But of course, I would love to do about 10 minutes or so of checking in. And so I would love to just, take turns and hear from either of you. And I've got 3 questions. One, just like a general check-in. How are you? What's going on in your world? How is the homework? How are things progressing with this group program? And then 2, what's your biggest celebration since we last connected? And then 3, what's your greatest challenge since we last connected? So, Bonnie, I'm wondering if you're able to close that door behind you. There's some background noise, like music or something coming through.
Oh, okay. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to move myself downstairs.
Okay.
Because
Cool.
It's a big office. It's pretty open.
Yeah, no worries. I just figured that way the recording could kind of background noise and stuff.
Do you want to mute me until I move downstairs?
Yeah, I'll do that. You are muted. Just give me the signal, kind of wave your hands around when you're ready. And are you still able to hear us, Bonnie? Yeah? Cool. So Barbara, you want to go first? You want to check in?
Apparently. So what was it? Biggest
just general
celebration?
Yeah, like how are you doing with the material? How do you feel like you're doing with what we've gone over so far? And then celebration and challenge.
Celebration and challenge. Material, celebration, and challenge. I didn't really look at the homework until today. I've been kind of
yeah, you've got a lot
off in another world. And it said I was supposed to review the trust part of the video, and I started going. I thought it was on. It's like my dinosaur status. I thought it was on Facebook, and then I realized, and so I went on to Facebook, and then I got distracted, and then I thought it was a Facebook group, but and then I realized that you got what got us on your website, but I never got to that.
No worries. Yeah, and the main homework from last week was to start building that evidence book of that trust.
Oh, right. I was supposed to do that too, and I didn't. But I do. Every Monday morning I write up, what I attracted or learned, or how I grew or accomplished, and so I did do that for the week this morning.
Great.
So I sort of got that as a built-in evidence journal, but it's not a daily, thing. I forgot about the every night thing.
Yeah, no worries. And, again, this really is a choose your own adventure. I mean, obviously, I'm going to present you with stuff to support you. And I don't want either one of you feeling bad if you didn't get to the stuff. The stuff will be here. These tools are here for you. And so, I'm cramming a lot into 8 weeks. So I want you to have as much as you can. But there's, it's totally understandable if there are certain parts of it that just feel like too much. I don't want you to weigh yourself down. You still need to be able to focus on your life and your business. So.
Yeah, and people are coming to me more than they used to, so that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'm super excited about this idea that I hinted at with Bonnie, but and I think so. This is just a check-in. This is not coaching.
Yeah, no, we'll do coaching later.
Okay, yeah. So I'm super excited about that.
Cool.
And then also sort of overwhelmed. It's like, how do I do that? And do it safely, without somebody else taking the idea and running with it. Who's got more money,
So is that kind of your celebration and challenge all together? Like the celebration, the new idea, and then the challenge is how do you make it happen and move forward? Great.
Right.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. How about you, Bonnie? So we're looking at check-in, how are you doing with material? Biggest celebration and biggest challenge?
So I've gotten myself all the way through week 1. And I started week 2, so I'm not quite finished with week 2, but I'm working on that. And my biggest celebration would be that I asked my doctor for my schedule to be blocked, because I feel like if I'm going to be invested in this material, I really need to be present as it's happening, just because otherwise I'm like in the back of my mind feeling like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and then it makes me overwhelmed and then I shut down. So I told him, I was like, I have to do that for myself in order to show up properly for my patients and not be concerned about missing stuff like that. So that was my big celebration, and my biggest challenge was actually meeting that, taking that need to my doctor and saying, hey, like, this is a boundary that I need to set. This is a learning style that I have to have, or I can't do intermittent, coaching. Like, I need to be present as it's happening, kind of thing. So he was understanding about that. He had the schedule blocked. So that was kind of a success and a challenge, because I'm not good with confronting people in a healthy way, or if I could even say just speaking my truth and letting people know what my needs are versus, just kind of rolling with it and being unhappy silently. So that was a big step for me.
Great. Congratulations. That's great. And that's, excuse me, that is like perfect timing for what we're going to be talking about today. So because you just had that experience, it'll be fresh in your mind, like both the benefits and the challenges that come with setting boundaries. So yay, well done. And are there any, so you said you went through week 1 and a little bit of week 2. Were there any like insights that you had while you were looking through the material that you feel are supportive to you right now?
I think being able to sit down and really like contemplate where I need to overcome my own insecurities about like coming into my story and using my story as a part of my business, then I kind of was just realizing, I'm like, wow, I really don't have the confidence that people tell me I have all the time. Maybe I should start paying attention to that and start focusing on those aspects versus what I'm not doing and what I'm not, so just switching my perception was huge over the week. I feel like I had a big shift in perception. I'm just being, and it's funny that I say that because everything has seemed to calm down. I don't feel as overwhelmed now.
Good.
So, yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know you just had your portrait session with Barbara, and I'm so excited to see the results. I know.
So good.
And I know that, in a few weeks, whenever you get those images, one of the things that I did, because you talked about like how other people see you, that's something that I realize a lot, even just this week, as I was over the weekend, I shared like, hey, I'm interested in speaking on bigger stages. What stages should I speak on? And the feedback I got was like, take over the world. I mean, that's not what it directly said, but a lot of people were like, you need to be on TEDx. You need to have your own YouTube channel. Like people saw me way bigger than I even still see myself. And so I bring that up because when I first got my images from Barbara back in 2017, they changed the way I saw myself.
I kind of feel like that's how come I was so excited about that experience, is because she brought that. I mean, I don't know if it was her or like you were saying, but there was this thing that just came out and I was just like photogenic for the first time in my life. So it felt good. So I get where you're at with that.
Yeah. So when you get those images, one of the things that I did was like every day for at least a month, I would start my day just looking through all my images. And it totally changed the way that I see myself. And still like, I'll be like, oh yeah, because sometimes, as a person who works from home and doesn't always get dressed up all the time, sometimes my image of myself is like, I'm in sweats and a t-shirt with no makeup on and my hair pulled back. And so to be like, well, that's not how other people see me. And that's not really the truth of who I am. I am both of those things. I am both the person in the sweats and this like beautiful woman that Barbara captured. And so to be able to take that in. So I know that there's some inner work there for sure. Like we're doing the inner work together now, but there's also that like being able to see ourselves more clearly, not only on the inside and what we're capable of, but just our energy and how we show up in the world. I'm excited for you, and I'm glad to be here with you on this process of seeing yourself more clearly.
Yes.
So I'm so excited to thank you both for sharing and for being here. I'm super excited about this. And boundaries are really important. They're kind of a buzzword, but you know, boundaries are so important in every area of our life, but especially business, and especially when we're going to be putting ourselves out into the world and showing up in a more vulnerably visible way. Because the problem is that most heart-led and conscious and caring practitioners either have like little to no boundaries or their boundaries are so rigid and protective that they don't let anything in, including new clients. And so we're going to look at this spectrum, you know, like anything in life. I don't believe in like two rigid categories. I believe in a spectrum, right? Or so on one extreme, we have like, sure, I'll let anything in and I'll say yes to anything and everything's fine. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, oh, I'm going to protect myself so much. I'm going to say no to everything. I'm not going to let anybody in. And so obviously we want to find somewhere in the middle, like with any spectrum, we want to be somewhere in the middle. And because, you know, super open boundaries mean that you're not really in charge of your own life. You're sort of giving your power away to anyone who asks for you. You're sort of just like, sure, I'll do whatever. Sure, I'll do whatever. And then you're not dictating your life. You're not actually checking in with yourself. You're not honoring your own needs and your own wants. And on the other end of the spectrum, the too rigid approach is it closes you off and it closes you off to like the spontaneity of life, like that kind of unexpected possibility that happens in our world. It's basically saying, if it's not within my control, I don't want it. And ironically, both of these extremes block our receptivity. Because if we're too loose with our boundaries, we're not going to trust ourselves to set healthy boundaries. So we're going to close ourselves off to receiving more. Because it's like, well, crap, if I share my story and then all of a sudden 100 people want a piece of me at the same time, I don't trust I'll know how to handle that. So I'll minimize it. I'll shut it down. I'll keep it closed. And at the same time, if we're too rigid, then we're closing off our receptivity as well, because we're basically saying, if it's not within exactly what I ordered from the universe, I don't want it. And the truth is that there's so much more to our world than what we can fathom, right? What we can fathom with our mind. And so I wanted to share a couple stories. I'll be sharing a few short stories throughout this just to kind of give examples of these things. So one of my favorite stories that really kind of blew my mind and set me on a new path when it came to boundaries is around my experience in the spiritual community. So I was a part of the spiritual community for 13 years by the time that I left. And this was probably around year 9 or 10 that I was there, maybe year 10 or 11. And I was participating in all the things. And I'll be honest, I was still coming from that kind of wounded child place that wanted belonging and thought that the only way to get belonging was to please everyone around. And so I wanted that love and approval and those little pats on the head that say, oh, you did such a good job, thank you so much. And that was kind of what fed me. And so if someone asked me to do something, I was the yes girl. I had little to no boundaries, and I would just say yes to all the things. And there was one mentor in particular who, while she was a super impactful woman in my life, and she was kind of like my pseudo mom and my practitioner and my mentor and my friend and my co-leader. We put on retreats together. We put on workshops together. But it had gotten to the point where she didn't really ask me if I could do things for her. She sort of just ordered me to do them. And I still remember this one day where here I am, taking care of my kid. And of course, I'm in classes too, so I'm studying and doing homework, and I'm running classes, so I'm preparing things. I've got a pretty full life, even outside of the center, and then a really full life within the center. And I still remember this one day where I was in the middle of something, and she called me up. She didn't even ask. She was just like, oh, hey, I was driving, and I thought about this thing. Thought I'd let you know I need you to do this thing. And then just kind of hung up. And it really sat funkily with me, like, wow, I know I respect and love this woman, but she didn't even ask me if I could, much less when I could. It was just like, I was thinking of this thing and you need to do it. And so it was that coming up Sunday that I was there at the spiritual center for their Sunday service. And they had 2 services, and the first service was much more meditative. It had like a 5 to 10 minute meditation, and it was much more like quiet and calm, and there was less people there. So I was at the morning I think I was singing that morning, so I was sitting right where the singer would sit. I still have it in my mind's eye. I think I was the vocalist for that service. And I was sitting there in meditation, and I was just kind of sitting with this, like, why is it that this woman who I respect so much is kind of like walking all over me? I'm like, what is, and I'm sort of letting her, like, what is that about? And so I was just sitting there, like, ruminating with this. And I had this vision, and it still gives me chills just saying that, because there was just this, like, boom, here's this vision. Now, I teach spirituality, and I don't believe in the vision of God where it's a male and he's got a beard and he's got like this white robe and stuff, right? Like, I don't believe that. But in this vision, that was the vision. And there was this wooden table, this kind of plain, square wooden table, and sitting in the chair at the head of the table was God, with the beard and everything and the white robe and stuff. And at the table was this pile of like red food substance, you know, like manna or something. It was just like this food substance. And here God was, like, taking some, putting it on his plate, kind of consuming some. And then every now and then he would just take like a little scrap, a little leftover, and just like toss it to the ground. And there I was on the ground, naked, in the fetal position, about the size of his foot. And every time a scrap would fall, I would go, oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Anything you can spare. And I was just like so grossed out by this idea that I was making myself so small and was basically like super satisfied with these tiny little scraps. And I had this realization that up until that moment of my life, everything I did was motivated by those scraps of attention, those scraps of the little pat on the head, good job, you did good. And it sort of grossed me out. Not in a like super heavily judging myself sort of way, but in the realization, like, awareness equals choice, right? So as soon as I was aware that this was happening, I was like, ew, I don't want to choose that anymore. And so here I was in this vision, and I became the size of God, and I pulled out another chair, and I sat down at the table, and I got my own cup and plate. And that moment of that day changed me. And it changed the way that I interacted with people. And I actually ended up having a conversation with this woman later that week. And I apologized to her. I said, you know, I think I need to apologize because I have set up our relationship in a way that isn't sustainable. And in the past, I would be totally willing to do all the things that you wanted me to do, because I was basing my motivations on getting scraps of attention from you and little pats on the head and little bits of approval and good job star. And I'm not doing that anymore. That's not what drives me anymore. That's not what motivates me anymore. So moving forward, if you want something from me, A, you're going to have to ask, and I get to decide if I do it or not. And B, I get to decide when and if it's going to be in my schedule. Like, you can't be calling me at 2:00 on a Tuesday and say I need this by Wednesday morning, because that's not, like, I need to put my life and my children and my priorities first. And that changed the dynamic of our relationship. Now, does that mean that it was easy with her? No, definitely not. And she definitely had some pushback for sure. But because I was in a self-validated place and I knew that I didn't want to be motivated by scraps anymore, that changed the trajectory, and that was where I started setting more bold boundaries in my life. And so I share that story because I think that each one of us can relate to some part of it. And I think that each one of us had times in our life, whether it's now or in the past, where we were motivated by those scraps, where it's like a scrap is enough, a little pat on the head, good job is enough. But the problem with that is that as soon as that job was over, I went back to square one and I needed to prove myself again, over and over again. And so when we're motivated only by scraps, or when our motivations are just for love and approval rather than impact and service, then we can get caught up in these weird, funky dynamics. So I wanted to share with you, I actually taught a workshop on boundaries earlier this year. And while it was a full 2-hour workshop and there was a lot, there's like 30 people in the room and there was a lot of partner shares and a lot of interactive stuff that we probably won't get into today because I want to give you as much content as possible. I wanted to share with you some stuff from the PDF that I created for that. Would that be all right? Sound good? Okay, let me make sure I'm at the proper place here. Okay, so let's talk about the warning signs of unhealthy boundaries. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So warning signs of unhealthy, incomplete, or lack of boundaries. So this is something to notice if you have a lot of this in your life. Again, always treat yourself with kindness and compassion. You don't need to judge yourself or make yourself wrong, but just awareness equals choice. If we're aware that these things are going on, we can make a different choice. The warning signs are resentment and or bitterness, regular cycles of overwhelm or burnout, fear of rejection when you put you first, saying yes when you mean no, backing out of commitments at the last minute regularly. I used to do that a lot. I used to just say yes to all the things. And then as it got closer to the thing, I didn't really want to do it. I was just saying yes to be a people pleaser. And then I would come up with an excuse or back out or, have some sort of illness come up or whatever the thing is. And then really feeling like your life is not your own. Like I was saying earlier, if you have little to no boundaries, your life really isn't your own because you're not choosing what to do. You're letting other people choose for you. And so I wanted to also talk about the roadblocks to boundaries. So here are some things that might keep you from setting boundaries. And I know that they were really true for me before I had that big realization. So one is not believing you're worthy of an amazing life, really having some inherent beliefs in unworthiness or doubting your worthiness. Disconnection from or distrust of your internal guidance system. We talked about trust last week. Fearing judgment from others or displeasing others. Like with my mentor, I said yes to her a lot of the time because I didn't want to displease her. I was kind of putting her in the role of my mom growing up. And I didn't really please my mom very much, so maybe I could please this woman and I can get that fed, right? But that's not really how stuff works. And then habitual bending to the will of others. That's a roadblock, because if you're always bending to the will of others, then you're not really gonna take the time to say yes or no based on what is in alignment with you. And you could be in relationship with people who make you wrong for saying no. I know that there was a dear friend of mine that I had for like 7 years, and it took me until about this point in my story that I was sharing with you to start seeing the ways that she was completely bulldozing my boundaries. She would say, hey, can I come over? And I'd say, oh gosh, it's not really a good night. The kids are sick or whatever. And she'd be like, oh, come on. I can come over even though your kids are sick. Or if I say, hey, I need to go take care of myself. Oh, come on. You can take care of yourself later. And there was this constant making me wrong for trying to make my life my own, because she wanted to be in charge of my life. She's not a friend anymore for various reasons that I won't get into during this call. But having friendships like that was sort of easy for me to do because I still didn't feel worthy, because I still was hungry for belonging and approval from others. I let people in my life who really showed up like the family of origin that I had and were treating me like that. And so I want to stop my share and talk a little bit about these things that I have brought forward. And I want you to just share with me in a few sentences what's coming up for you so far.
This is probably one of my biggest issues that I think I've had across my lifetime. I resonate so much with the whole taking scraps, and one of my previous patterns used to be regular cycles of overwhelm. And like when you're talking about backing out of commitments last minute regularly, that was something that I would do all the time. Like all the time. And now, like you're saying yes when you really mean no. Something I saw just actually this last week is saying yes when you really mean no is a form of disrespect.
Yeah.
And so something like that is the fact that everything kind of is being synchronistic for me right now is this is something that I'm working through really, diligently to try to set up healthy boundaries, because something I am aware of is that when I set healthy boundaries for myself, that's when everything else starts to fall into place for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this is perfect. And I resonate with everything that you say as far as taking scraps. I mean, I've always thought that, that I've had to take scraps because that's all I was worth.
Yep.
It's definitely learning something. I mean, I'm definitely seeing that's a broken cycle, I guess I should say.
Yeah. And it just doesn't serve what we're here to do.
Not at all.
You know, and the thing with our past behaviors, and thank you for sharing that. The thing with our past behaviors is we have to understand they got us to where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Like that worked for whatever reason in whatever situation we were in.
Mm-hmm.
But as we grow, certain behaviors can't grow with us. It's like trying to fit into clothes that are 3 sizes too small.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like if I want to, that got me from there to here, but if I want to get here to there, I'm going to have to shift this up. I'm going to have to try a new strategy because this strategy is no longer working to get my needs met and to allow me to be in service to my people. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so glad of the synchronicity. I love that that was today's topic and you're already seeing some movement for yourself this week.
Yeah.
How about you, Barbara? What came up for you?
Oh, yeah, it's a lifelong challenge for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I am getting better, but I've got a long way to go. Yeah, that unworthiness thing, you know, and definitely I have those cycles of overwhelm and fear of rejection if I put myself first. I don't know if I say yes when I mean, no, I guess I do sometimes, but a lot of times I just go silent. I don't know, I just disappear. But I definitely back out of commitments that I used to. Now I don't make them. I rarely make a commitment that I back out of. I just realize that I'm not interested in a lot of things I think I'm supposed to be interested in.
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that funny?
And the feeling like my life is not my own, that was what brought about the end of my marriage. You know, it's like I was too much saying, you know, whatever you want, and, you know, letting him be the, you know, the leader. Yeah, so I didn't get all the roadblocks written down, but.
Oh, they'll, so this PDF will be in your lesson material.
Okay.
For you to access later. I just didn't want to give it to you first because I don't want you reading through the whole thing first before we hop on our call. Thank you for sharing that. And so why don't you each take just a minute and write out for yourself what might be your biggest roadblocks to building boundaries. And so I'm going to share my screen again and just share the ones that are here so you can get ideas, but feel free to write out your own. Roadblocks. Here we go. Oh, like we're not looking at that part yet. Sorry. I'll give you maybe just 30 more seconds to write out any that you can think of. You can, like I said, take ones that are on this list or add your own. All right. So would either of you want to briefly share any roadblocks that you see in yourself that may not be on this list?
Yeah, shrinking and avoiding. I mean, that maybe is related to being disconnected from my internal guidance system.
No, but I mean, it shows up in different.
And unworthiness. Yeah, it shows up as just, yeah, not showing up.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Bonnie, did you come up with anything?
A couple. So like just not trusting myself when I, feel that I want to say no, that kind of thing. Or not clearly setting my boundaries with others, and allowing others to make me feel small for setting boundaries. Those are what I kind of came up with.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute. And so I want to just share a little bit of a reframe. And it's hard to hear at first, but then it's also kind of liberating. You know how stuff like that, where you're like, oh, that stings a little, but woof, kind of like my visual of me receiving the scraps. It was like, oh, that's kind of gross. And yay, now I have this information and I can do something else. So that's my purpose in sharing this part. So something that really hit home for me probably about 10 years or so ago, and has changed a lot in how I relate to others, is recognizing that we teach others how to treat us by how we treat ourselves and what we put up with, what we allow from the people around us. And Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements, he says it in this, or maybe it was the Art of Relationship, I can't remember, but it was Don Miguel Ruiz, either way. He says that we surround ourselves with people who abuse us about as much as we abuse ourselves.
Ouch.
I know,
wow,
right?
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
Yes, we surround ourselves with people who abuse us about as much as we abuse ourselves. And so if people treat us better than we treat ourselves, that's when we get really uncomfortable. That's like why we avoid compliments, or why we don't see ourselves as clearly as other people see us, is because we have a distorted view of ourselves, and it makes us uncomfortable when people see us really bright and shiny if we're not seeing ourselves that way. And like a thermostat, if it's like it keeps us right here. If people treat us shittier than we treat ourselves, that's where it's like easy to set a boundary and be like, no, I don't put up with that. And if people treat us better, then we kind of avoid those people because we're just uncomfortable and we don't like looking at ourselves in a better light than we do. But what happens is, as we treat ourselves better and better, we put up with less abuse from the people around us. And so one of two things happen. And I've seen this happen, both of these things happen over and over again in my life, because I've done a lot of inner work. And so I keep kind of upgrading and treating myself better and better and better. And so number one, like that friend that I was talking about who used to bulldoze my boundaries, when I started setting healthier boundaries and treating myself better, she made me wrong, kind of projected all the things that she was doing to me upon me as though I was doing them to her, and left my life in a big huff. And that happens when people are unable to treat us better because they're still treating themselves crappy. It's not necessarily a sign of how much they love or care for us. It's really more a sign that we're starting to treat ourselves less abusive than they treat themselves. And so now we're the ones that they resist because we're doing a better job of being true to ourselves and caring for ourselves than they are to themselves. And then the other is there's a renegotiation process where there might, like with my mentor, where I had to be like, hey, I need to be treated differently now. I realize that I'm the one that set up this unspoken agreement that I would just take your call and do whatever you said for that little scrap and pat on the head, but I'm no longer willing to do that. We're going to have to do something else. And while it was uncomfortable and there was some resistance from her, she eventually renegotiated, and we were able to continue to put on workshops together and retreats together and teach together and have her be my mentor. And so that's basically as we treat ourselves better and better. So the thing to keep in mind, it's so important, especially when we're starting business relationships, is how we start the relationship is what the person will expect moving forward. And so if we think that we're going to impress somebody by having loose boundaries or by giving it all away to start, it's actually going to backfire on us, because when we start to set boundaries, when we start to pull back, they're going to perceive it as we broke an agreement. or now we're doing worse than, or we're not giving them what we promised. Because at the beginning we gave it all away. So here's an example. Years ago, probably like 8 or 9 years ago, my husband and I had a roommate that didn't go very well. We put an ad on Craigslist, and we got this couple that said they were going to only stay for about 3 months. And so because they were only going to stay for about 3 months, we put out all the stops. We helped make them dinner. We wanted them to feel so warm and comfortable. We wanted to be the lovely hosts and the lovely household. And we kind of just like let them have all the things, and we were super generous. They ended up staying for 1.5 years. And after about 1 year of them just taking, because that's how we set it up. That's how we set up the agreement. I finally had to set some boundaries and say like, hey, I know that this was okay in short term, but after 1 year, like, you need to stop using my razors and buy your own. Or, you know, if you're going to use all the spice, like, you need to purchase the new spice or whatever the things were. And they got ugly. And they made us wrong for setting these boundaries. And after some really ugly stuff that we had to leave that home and stuff I won't go into, my husband and I sat down and we were looking back and we're like, what went wrong? I was like, well, it was kind of on us. Because we set up the relationship as though they could just take all this stuff, that they could just treat us the way that they were treating us. And we didn't set any boundaries because we wanted to be nice and we wanted to make them feel welcome. But we didn't set it up in a sustainable way. And so then when we started setting boundaries and saying, no, that's not okay, we were the bad guys because we broke an unspoken agreement that they can continue to take from us. And so boundaries are super important at the very beginning, especially as you're setting up a relationship with a potential client, because you don't want them to think that they can get all of you. And then when you start setting up that boundary, they feel like you're not delivering what you promised. It's actually more likely to make an unhappy customer than if you set super clear boundaries in the beginning. Let them know when you're available, when you're not available. Let them know what to expect from their relationship with you. And so part of boundaries is setting up expectations. And so I want to go back to the template because your fears are, you know, some of your fears are pretty valid in the sense that there are some side effects to setting bold boundaries. and remember, you don't have to take all these notes because you're going to get the PDF, but I wanted to read through them really quick. So side effects, setting bold boundaries may stir up relationships where people have been benefiting from you always saying yes. It may bring up shame or regret for not setting boundaries sooner. It might show you areas of inner work to focus on or to get support around. Look out, it may create more time for fun and play. That's a side effect. It might even connect you more deeply with your higher self. Be aware. It might support you in attracting people and experiences that honor your deepest needs and desires. And it might even increase trust in yourself and your power to choose. So these are some side effects to setting bold boundaries. And I know I'm sharing a lot of stories today, but that's because I too have been working on boundaries like my whole fucking life. And because I've been working on them, I have a lot to say, I have a lot of skills, and I have a lot of examples. This is kind of my final story before we go a little bit deeper into the meat of how to do it, what a bold boundary is. So I was at this women's retreat, and it was shortly after this friendship with this woman who was just like, oh, come on, let me come over, had ended. And the previous 2 years, I had been at this women's retreat with this friend. And she was kind of bigger and louder and more bold than me. And so here I was at this retreat and she wasn't there. I was feeling very exposed. And I was feeling very tender and pretty vulnerable. And I had a lot of inner processing, which women's retreat is a perfect place for that. And so I was sharing a room with another practitioner. This was, I think, a year or two before I had graduated as an actual spiritual practitioner. And she was one of the practitioners at the center. Amazing woman. Definitely my vibe, kind of hippie and eclectic and a little weird. And so I'm like, oh, my people. And we had known each other for years. And there was one particular day where a bunch of stuff got stirred up in me. It was the end of the evening. And there was this bench in the woods that in past years I had gone and processed at. So I was gathering my journal and I wanted to go have some journal time on the bench in the woods before it got dark. And she saw me gathering my stuff and she goes, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. And And she goes, oh, can I come with you? And of course, I really wanted to say no, but I didn't know how to do that yet. I was still just baby stepping into boundaries. This is long before the stuff with my mentor. This was long before my image of scraps. This was kind of at the very beginning of my boundary setting journey. And so I kind of set half a boundary. And I said, well, you can walk with me until I get to the bench. But then after that, I'd really like to be left alone so I can journal and process and stuff. And even that was a really big deal for me to ask at that time. And then she said the magic words that would change my life. And I'm getting teared up just thinking about them. She said something to me that no one has ever said. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she looked me right in the eye. And she said, thank you for asking for what you need. I had never experienced that before. To not only have my boundary honored, which was new for me as well, because I was so used to setting a boundary and then having it be bulldozed over and be made wrong for even setting it. Not only was she not doing that, she was thanking me for asking for what I needed. And so that phrase has become a part of my language. Whenever anybody, if I'm asking them, hey, you want to go such and such? And they go, oh, I don't know. I think I need to stay home and take care of myself tonight. And you can tell they have a little guilt for even setting the boundary in the first place. And I go, oh, no problem. Thanks for asking for what you need. And I can see the relief and just the, oh. And so I want you to fathom, as you're starting to set these boundaries, as you're practicing these skills, that you can and will attract people into your life that will not only respect your boundaries, but will appreciate them. And that's where true friendship and camaraderie, and even in a business relationship, if you attract clients who honor and support you in setting boundaries, those are the best clients ever. And so we're going to go back and keep going back and forth. We're going to go back to the boundaries thing. And so let's start talking about what the mindset is around setting boundaries. So here's the bold boundary mindset. So you can use these as affirmations if you like. You can change them to work for you. But these are just the ways that we hold ourselves and our life when we're able to set bold boundaries. It's safe to ask for what I need. Right? It's not only that it'll be honored, but it's actually safe to ask it. I'm not going to be bulldozed. I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be made wrong. I'm worthy of creating a life that works for me. When my cup is full, I can give to others from a sense of plenty. When we set boundaries, we have an opportunity to really fill our cup. I surround myself with people who respect and honor my boundaries, like this woman, who I'm still so grateful for. My life is my own, and I'm willing to listen to and act on my needs and desires. And so these are just some of the mindsets that if you start feeling those roadblocks, that resistance come up, these are a great place to return to. And again, you can even put them in that you frame that we've been talking about. Look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, Bonnie, it is safe to ask for what you need. And start building that new pathway in your brain, because our brains are wired for habitual thoughts. And so a lot of this is just retraining them to think different thoughts. And it sounds simplistic. Doesn't mean it's easy. It takes commitment and practice and diligence and consistency, but it's possible. And so what is a bold boundary? The bold boundaries have three components. That was a weird Freudian slip there. I'm sure that bold boundaries have way more than three opponents. 3 components. They're unapologetic. So that means you don't have to say, oh, I'm sorry, but I can't really do that. You can just be like, that's not going to work for me. They're explanation free. When I first started setting boundaries, I did it in a super wishy-washy way where I would say, no, I can't because, and then I'd put a whole freaking paragraph of why I couldn't do the thing. That just diminishes the setting of the boundary, because what happens when you explain yourself is you're basically asking for their feedback on your explanation, and it's almost like you're asking them to poke holes in your explanation so that they can talk you into doing what they want to do. So don't even explain yourself. Just say this is the thing. Sometimes explanations are necessary, like in Bonnie's situation, there was like, hey, I need this time so that I can this. But that's different than telling someone who doesn't need to know your life story just so that you can frame that you're worthy of setting a boundary. And the other part that's really important is that bold boundaries come from a place of self-worth and self-value as opposed to fear or lack. And I think a lot of times when people start setting boundaries, they set them from a place of fear or lack. Like I was talking about that super rigid protective boundary setting thing, where it's like, well, I'm afraid I won't have enough of me, so I have to protect me. As opposed to, I am worthy of taking care of myself, and I'm going to set a boundary to make sure that my needs are met. Very different energy, even though from the outside it might look the same. And so 3 steps to setting bold boundaries. First, decide. Now, I have to just put a caveat in here. I don't really like the third D, but I was really attached to having them all be Ds, and I couldn't find another D word that said what I wanted to say. So, like sometimes we gotta just go with it. So decide. First, really decide that you're worth it, and decide what you're willing or not willing to do. Right? Like with my mentor, I decided that if she wanted me to do something, she had to ask, and I got to say yes or no. And then I got to choose the time frame with which it got completed. And then declare, communicate your needs to yourself and others. So like Bonnie, for example, you decided that what would be best for you in this group program was really to show up on Mondays live. And then you declared your needs to your boss. Here's what I need. I really need this to be the truth for me so I can get the most out of this program. And then again, defend. And I don't really like the idea of defensive because it implies a little bit of a battle, but it's really about standing in your own power and not backing down. Really knowing that, okay, this boundary, I'm worthy of setting this boundary and I'm going to hold it, even if you don't like it, and even if you try to bulldoze it. And so the bold boundaries inner work, which we've already talked about a little bit, is to know that you're worth it. Like Barbara, you were talking about worthiness, being a component for you. And obviously, I'm not saying how to do this inner work here. I'm just noting that these are the areas of inner work to focus on, is to really look at your root causes, kind of where is your history of overgiving and people pleasing coming from. That's a lot of the work that I do in my private client sessions. I know Barbara and I have done a lot of that work, is looking at those roots. Like, where does this pattern come from? And what are you trying, like for me, it was a mom that wasn't really around a lot, had no boundaries, and I just wanted love and approval. And so the scraps were enough because it was better than nothing. And so I had to shift that dynamic. Another place of inner work is looking at the fact that you're not responsible for people's feelings about your choices. If people have problems with your boundary setting, that's their shit, not yours. And they get to figure that out on their own time. Another area of inner work is really cultivating that inner security and that resilience that we were talking about in week 1, and safety so that you can ask for what you need. And then the outer work, of course, is to be as kind and firm as you can when you communicate your boundaries. You don't want to be shitty about it. This isn't like a, well, I need to, this is more like, hey, here is something that I need. You want to surround yourself with people and communities who honor you. And you want to align your life with who you really are and what you really need and want. Because it's much harder to set boundaries around a life that you're pretending is yours than it is to set boundaries for a life that really is who you are. And so I know that we started a little bit late and I've got a lot of content here. You can look at this on your own time. Here's just some ideas and suggestions for areas that you can set some boundaries in your life. There's some media, there's some self-care in your relationships, in your work, some physical boundaries. I'm not going to go over those too much. I'll let you go over those. But I would like to say that your homework is to really name one area of your life where your boundaries are either too loose or too rigid, and where that is holding you back. And again, I'm going to type all this homework out into the members area. And so first step 1 is to notice an area in your life that you're either too loose or too tight boundaries are really holding you back. To make a plan, right? What is your plan? What are you going to do instead? and to really get the support that you need here with us in the Facebook group and in the coaching areas to keep building that boundary inside. And so just my final thing that I want to say about this is, our subconscious is here to protect us. I don't know how much you know about our subconscious, but they say anywhere from 85 to 95% of our thoughts are unconscious. They're just kind of acting on autopilot. And so, as I said earlier, if you don't trust yourself to set boundaries with coworkers, colleagues, clients, and followers, you will subconsciously hold yourself back. You won't share as much. You won't show up as much. You won't connect as much out of fear of what you will create or accept. And I will say that this is still my growth edge as I continue to grow and grow and grow. I have almost 5,000 friends on Facebook. And sometimes I'm like, ooh, I want to get engagement. And then I go and I put a post of engagement, and then there's like 100-something comments. And then I get overwhelmed and I pull back and go, oh no, I can't respond to everybody. And so I'm still working on, this isn't a one and done, check it off the list and now we're gone. This is, along with all of the inner assets, we're going to work on the boundaries that work with our life now. And then as we expand, we're going to need to go up that upward spiral and take on a new level of working on our boundaries. And so this isn't like, okay, I did boundaries. This is really an ongoing practice. So like, as I imagine myself doing YouTube videos and having a YouTube channel, that opens me up to the public. And as we know, the public isn't always very kind. And so, then I have to set boundaries with myself around who I interact with, how much of myself I give, who I'm willing to respond to and who I'm not willing to respond to, and where I focus my time. So that concludes the end of our boundaries section for today. Hopefully you got a lot out of it and that you have some stuff in your life that you can start to apply right now. And so what I'd love to do is stop this recording, which I'm going to do right now.